All right, with less than 3 weeks until the midterm, some GOP hopefuls are turning to former Vice President Mike Pence for support. He's been traveling the nation, fundraising and endorsing Republican candidates, some of whom have voiced support for former President Trump's false claims of a stolen 2020 election. CBS News political director Finn Gomez joins us now from Washington to discuss. So Mike Pence, Finn, is now a big draw for some GOP candidates, some who are on the side of MAGA Republicans, but a lot who are not. So what is his appeal?
I think his appeal is that he essentially has a sort of a neutralizing factor for some people who are in that MAGA, who are not in that MAGA base. He has this ability to be someone who can appeal to, frankly, a larger swath of the Republican Party than just one sector than the other. He embodies also the Trump policies, if you will. He was the vice president of that administration, and those policies are they're popular amongst the Republican Party, and it's embodying those Trump policies without actually being the former president. So it's sort of this thread that he has, this lane that he has that is really unique to the former vice president.
But he is backing some election deniers. Why would he do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question, Anne-Marie. The fact, I just talked to one of his senior advisors just before this hit, and he basically said that it's more about Pence being a team player and going to where he needs to be, because, he's focused on winning as many seats as possible for the Republican Party, helping those candidates. He was just with Blake Masters, the Arizona Republican senatorial candidate who has essentially been an election denier. And it's more about trying to help these candidates in these tight races. And so if it wins, there's also a political payoff, right? There's also a political payoff for Mike Pence as he considers a possible 2024 White House bid.
So how will the outcome of the midterms play a role in the 2024 presidential elections, especially for someone like Pence who could be laying the groundwork for his own bid for the White House?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Vlad, also, because I mean, again, it's a part of it is just like really trying to get invest in like investing early in a stock, if you will, by doing so, by connecting with some of these candidates in these crucial battleground states. And if they win, he looks like the hero, right? So one of the things that the criticisms that you hear both internally and externally about the former President Donald Trump is that he backs certain candidates who were good, perhaps in winning the primaries in some of these states, but have been not so strong in the general election once you get to that phase. So by Mike Pence helping those in the general election phase, it may carry them over the line. So by doing that and by doing that, he could, and as I said, he is, it looks like he is considering a 2024 bid. He has two speeches today in Washington, D.C. The first one was initially postponed, but it outlines his agenda on certain aspects of his platform, and it really just sounds, it smells, and walks like a potential 2024 bid. So I think that, he also has a book coming out soon, right after the election. And so all of these are certainly indicators that is a real possibility for the former vice president. I will have to say very quickly that, in most polls, he's still far behind former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, among others, really registering in the single digits. But so he's got a long way to go, but he's trying to set that platform, trying to set that framework, post midterms.
So former President Trump is hosting a rally in Texas this weekend. Sort of surprised that he's going to Texas. Are there close races in Texas, and what can we expect from this rally?
When I covered maybe 75 Trump rallies during my time at the White House and covering being on the trail with the former president, and part of what that a lot of people close to the former president say is that he gets fueled by these rallies, by the sort of adulation from his base. I think part of that is that. I mean, he's going to a safe state. He's going to be west of Corpus Christi, Texas. But interestingly enough, I mean, you know, maybe the closest race is the gubernatorial one, Anne-Marie, with Greg Abbott running against the incumbent Republican running against Beto O'Rourke in that gubernatorial race. But it's really not that close. Most polls show about a 6 to 8 point average between those two. But you know, Abbott has not committed to going to this rally. But it's, you know, it's more about shoring up this, you know, his base. It's more about getting that, you know, it's really like, you know, preaching to his choir, if you will. And that's what Texas is about. He does have a couple other very pro-Trump candidates, politicians, Republican politicians who will be attending, including the Lieutenant Governor, Dan Patrick, and the controversial Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who are both running for re-election. They're both going to be speakers.
All right. Finn Gomez, thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie. Thanks, Vlad.